Okay, good morning everyone. This is, as I'm sure you know, the last kind of full lecture you have at this academy. And we left this lecture slot open at the start of the week to be filled with an issue that the faculty agreed many of you, or most of you, needed more help with. So that's what the advantage of intermediate groups together this morning. Is because we think this lecture is about a common problem for you guys in debates. And that is about how you find the most important issues in a debate. Okay? So how you decide what it is on both sides you really should be arguing about. What is this debate really about? Now, I want to start by saying two things under the heading, debating isn't like maths. Okay? And the first of those is that I will say some things in this lecture about how you find the most important issues. And they won't always be right. They won't always be the best way to find the most important issues in the debate. That's because debating there isn't an algorithm to make you good at debating. Okay? There's not a set of equations that you can just apply, and we're just hiding the equations. And if you just apply the equations properly, then you'll get the right answer. Okay? In the same way that might be true in mathematics or science, debating isn't really like that. So when someone says to you, often debates are about two values clashing, or to work out if something is a policy debate or a values debate. Not all debates fit in that framework. Okay? It's not true for 100% of debates. So what you have to get used to is the idea of applying multiple different techniques, okay, using many different tools that you have to find the right answer. Okay? So I will say some things in this lecture, and for many, many debates, hopefully, they will be helpful, but they won't be helpful for all debates. So in feedback this afternoon, I shouldn't hear other adjudicators and other trainers saying to me, oh, but apparently you told the kids this, and then they were just desperate to apply it to that debate. Okay? If what I say doesn't work for the debate in front of you, don't use it. Now, presumably, then the second question is, well, how do you know when a technique is or isn't relevant? Okay? And the main answer is practice will get you there. Okay? So that's the other way debating isn't really like maths. Okay? You can't expect to find the perfect answer on your first try just because you've been taught a lot about it. Okay? It's also about practicing, about putting the things you learn to use, and then you just develop a kind of sense for what is important in a debate and what isn't important in a debate. But I can now tell you in seconds, without really thinking about it, what I think the important issues are in a debate. And most of the time, not all of the time, but much of the time, that will be right. Okay? And that's just because I've done so many debates, I've been debating for 8 years now, that I just have a kind of sixth sense for these things. Okay? And you will get there. Okay? I debated in high school. I'm only 22. I debated a lot in high school. I know I don't look like I'm 22, but that's just the major error. Okay, it's good. Okay, I'm going to split this lecture then into two parts. The first is identifying issues. Okay, and the second will be deciding which of the issues you've identified as important. I'm going to call it ranking issues when we get there. So, how do we identify issues? Hands up if you found the motion about Disney and animated gay characters a bit strange. You all found that motion perfectly normal? Go on, hands up if you thought it was weird. Okay, no one? Alright. Debates like that are pretty common. Okay, that is nowhere near the strangest or most unusual debate that I have seen. And often you will be faced with a motion where you're just staring at it being like, what is going on? What does that mean? I don't understand. Why have the chief adjudicators set this topic? Sometimes the answer is because they were drunk, but that won't be the answer at this tournament. Not at too many tournaments. So, how do we work out? I should say, sorry guys, what I mean by issues here is broadly the same thing as I mean by clash. So, it's not just about arguments, because arguments will often deal with issues, but about the kind of big themes in the debate. Okay? What you should really be thinking about, what your arguments should be aiming to prove. Okay? So, how do we deal with, how do we identify the key issues when we're faced with an unusual motion? A couple of ways. The first thing to do is to just look at the words of the motion. Okay? Now, to give an example, let's take this house believes that Western countries so this is going to take a while to write out, but I will do. Should impose should make development aid conditional on population control. Well, that's going well. Okay. Western countries should make development aid conditional on population control. So the motion is basically that for countries that receive aid from the United States, the European Union, Australia, I guess Japan, arguably, that's a sort of definitional question. What Western means. In order to get money or stuff as foreign aid, they should have to instigate population controls. So basically something like the one-child policy. And this has actually been talked about quite seriously in policy circles, particularly for certain Latin American countries. So, how do we go about deciding what the issues are in this debate? Well, one way you can do it, and I think one very effective way, is just to look at the words and say what type of issues do we think that gives rise to. So, Western countries, okay, that I'll explain in a second, I think will give rise to several issues. Make, okay, so even an innocuous word like make, I think, might actually become very important because it's something that's happening, okay? Development aid, that's obviously going to be important. Conditional, again, I think that will, in fact, these two will tie in together, okay? But there will be issues about enforcing things on people. And then population control, what that is, okay? So already, basically just by reading the motion carefully, it's starting to look like we've got at least 4, maybe 5 arguments on either side. So, Western countries. What might the issue be there? What's the thing, so thinking about this motion as a whole, what are some problems or benefits of Western countries doing this? Okay, so imagine you're the opposition. Okay, and you know broadly the proposition is going to say population growth slows down economic growth, creates all sorts of problems to do with overcrowding, and so it's important for countries to control their populations. Your opposition. What are some issues that arise from Western countries doing this? Good 45 people in the room. No one thinks this is at all controversial. I'm not going to give you the answer, so someone's going to have to volunteer one. Or we're just going to stand here in awkward silence for some time. Go on, someone raise their hand.
Financial burden.
Sorry?
Financial burden.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Maybe in the developed countries, in most Western developed countries, there is a very serious aging problems. So there are many elderly people to be raised by the society.
Okay, yes, so that's definitely a big issue or proposition. And that's good. But what I'm really interested in is just looking at this phrase at the moment. Okay, what's the problem with a Western country doing this? So they're imposing this policy on other states.
Because they're rich.
Yeah. Okay, so that's definitely one thing, right? Is it okay that Western governments should, just because they are rich, and so in a position where they are giving money to poorer countries, and you might say that's an obligation, right? They are morally obligated to give that money. So it's not like it's not discretionary, it's something they have to do. Is it right that they should, just because they are rich, decide what government policy is in other poorer countries? Probably not. Any other issues that arise from that? Yeah.
Because our population creates global issues like climate change, something that concerns the Western countries' interests.
Very good. So that's obviously an argument for the proposition. Oh, shut up. That's obviously an argument for the proposition, not the opposition. But yeah, absolutely. Equally, overpopulation creates problems that spill outside borders. Okay, they go well beyond borders. change, refugee problems, etc., that arise from overpopulation, so that this is an area where your national sovereignty doesn't override. Very good. So I would say another potential issue is what you might call post-colonialism. Okay, so there's, I think, something wrong probably, or at least something uncomfortable about the idea of countries that once had an empire, like my country, going back to the countries that they colonised and saying, now you have to do this, we're going to decide how you control your population. Okay, that kind of seems like it's probably, if not definitely wrong, at least kind of worrying. So there's an issue about that. Right, let's talk about development aid. How might we get an issue out of that? Still, I'm not going to give you the answer.
Maybe the population structure has been altered, and then the development, for example, the economy will be greatly affected.
Yeah, very good. So one reason to do this might be that development aid is about increasing economic wealth. It's about speeding up economic growth. And changing the population structure may well help that process, because demographic problems slow down economic growth. So like, when you have too many elderly people, obviously this is, a problem that China knows well about, but you then have not enough people to support the elderly people, and that creates all sorts of economic and social problems. This hits on the second thing I want to talk about, which is purposes. Okay? So, sometimes you are given a motion that is about using a particular thing, like development aid, to achieve some goal. Okay? So, we sometimes say that the first thing is the means, and it's the means to an end. Okay? So the means here is aid, and the end is slowing the population growth. Okay? And we are basically using this to do this. Okay? Using thing 1 to do thing 2. It's a bit like, although this analogy isn't perfect, but like in the Disney debate, we are using Disney films, their means, and the end is gay rights. Okay? So it's that sort of thing. Okay? Now, the means will often be quite a large thing, okay? It will often be something that's used for all sorts of different goals, like development aid. Okay, so we use development aid to speed up economic growth, we use it to achieve political change, we use it to protect the environment, we mean all sorts of different things by economic growth as well, so, there's a whole range of stuff that we do with economic growth. And one very good way of coming up with arguments that are important is to look at the purpose of that means. Okay? So to say, what is the purpose of development aid? Okay, what is the role that development aid should play? And why does our policy fit that role, fit that aim, that general aim? Or not? Okay? So, in the case of development aid, I've just said its main purpose is to achieve economic growth. And so then we have to say, then proposition might say, well, because the purpose of development aid is to achieve economic growth, and the population structure is key in determining the speed of economic growth, our policy fits the purpose of development aid. An opposition might say, no, no, no. Because the purpose of development aid is to achieve economic growth, you can't try and use it for other social goals, okay, which is what you're trying to do here. Because you're trying, basically, to use development aid as a way of slowing down population growth, but that's not what it's about. Okay, that's not what it should be about. Right. That covers what I wanted to say about identifying issues. Now let's talk about the second part, which I'm going to call ranking issues. Okay? So, some arguments may be perfectly applicable to the debate. They may be really strong arguments in the sense that they are almost certainly true and very hard to defend. Okay, that is to say, they are robust to criticism from the other side. But you still shouldn't make them. Or at least you shouldn't make them prominently. Okay? Now that might sound quite surprising, right? The argument can't be criticised. It's a really strong argument. It's a really hard to beat argument. Why on earth would I not make a hard to beat argument? The answer is that nobody cares about the argument. The argument is not important. Okay? And really, I think part of what this lecture is about is saying, what are the issues which really matter in this debate? And often they won't be the best issues for your side. Okay? So, like, in this debate, like, the fact that this will lower the cost of development aid to some countries that refuse population control and make more money available to give aid to other countries, or just make the policy cheaper for the West. Like, that is true, okay? As a proposition team, like, an opposition team isn't really going to be able to deny that that argument is true. Okay? It's a perfectly fine argument. Still probably shouldn't make your own proposition, though. It's not important. No one cares. So, how do you decide when an argument is worth caring about? And that's really the kind of heart of the second part of this lecture. I want to suggest that there are basically three things that go into deciding how you rank an issue. Okay? And they are relevance, weight, and believability. So, relevance. Arguments must always be relevant. It's the most common criticism that I hear of and make of beginner debaters, that their arguments aren't relevant. What do we mean by that? Well, to be relevant, an argument, all it has to be, it's not, at least on the face of it shouldn't be that hard. All it has to be is about the motion. Okay, that's literally it. It just has to be about the motion. Now, So, I mean something a little bit more complicated than that. For an argument to be relevant, it has to be achievable by the motion. Okay? So, say you had a motion about making maternity and paternity leave equal. Okay? So, forcing mothers and fathers to take the same amount of time off work when they have a child. Okay? That was round one of Worlds in 2012. It's a pretty common debate. Okay? Now, in a very broad sense, that debate is about gender. Okay? But it wouldn't be a relevant argument to explain at great length why there are double standards applied between men and women when talking about sexuality. Okay? So it is in a sense a debate about gender discrimination, but nothing about the policy is going to solve problems to do with the objectification of women or double standards in the way we talk about men and women. That's not going to go away. So that argument is irrelevant. Okay? It is not relevant to the debate. An argument which certainly would be relevant is that it will remove double standards in the way that companies hire and fire people. Okay? Because often companies are less willing to hire women because they worry about them taking time off work to have kids. Okay? So that argument, and that is the problem that this motion might solve. So that argument is expressly relevant to the motion. Okay? Similarly, on a trivial level, it wouldn't be relevant to make arguments about global warming. Okay? Just because. The debate's not about global warming. I mean, some of you snicker, but you would be surprised to see how often very generic arguments about big global issues come up in debates where they're just not relevant. Okay? And what the issue is changes every so often. So, when I first started schools debating, God, that's bleak. When I first started schools debating, the big issue was the Second Iraq War. Okay? And like lots of kind of bad debating speeches were like, and you know, this government which took us into the Iraq War, this criminal government, am I right? Anyway, we should change the way that parking fines are applied. Like, things which just aren't relevant. Often it's a bit more like complex than that, right? So arguments tended to be basically Western governments shouldn't pursue X foreign policy because the Iraq War. Then for a while it was global warming. So preventing global warming was the like hip issue, and I remember in a debate I did once about abolishing monarchy, so getting rid of the Queen for England, an argument about how it would reduce transportation both for the monarch and her family, and also to go visit the palaces that she occupied and for state events, and so it would reduce global warming. And now the hip bad argument is the global financial crisis. Okay? So like, in these tough economic times after the global financial crisis, we shouldn't do this thing that costs some money. Like, those arguments just aren't relevant because they're just not really about the motion. Okay? Like, I accept that in some sense we should have the global financial crisis in the backs of our minds a lot, but it's not like what the debate in front of you is really about. Okay? That's relevance. The second one is weight. Okay, what do I mean by weight? Well, basically, to decide how weighty an argument is, to decide how much weight it carries, ask yourself, if I win this argument, but I lose another argument in this debate, who wins? Okay? So we've done quite a few topics about adoption and so on in exercises at this academy. Okay, and a lot of the time, arguments have focused on the welfare of parents who want to adopt. Now, look, I think parents wanting to adopt is a great thing. I think it's obviously quite important. But in almost no debate will an adjudicator say, or will a summary speaker be able to say, you guys did prove to me that children, both adopted and unadopted, would be a lot worse off because of this debate, because of this policy. But I just feel as though the other team's analysis about parents' rights was so strong that that outweighs the material. Okay? That's just not going to happen, because the core of that debate is the issue of children. Okay? The core of any debate, so like this has to ban international adoption, is the impact on the children. Now that's not to say you shouldn't make those other arguments, but you really do need to consider how much weight they carry. Okay? And that's basically how you decide it. And the weightier an argument is, the more time you should spend on it, and the further up your case it should be. Okay? The more it should be like bang at the beginning of your first proposition speech. Now, to some extent, that is a common sense judgment that comes with time. Okay? How weighty is this argument? But it is important. Final thing, believability. Okay? So, I mean by this just something relatively simple. If you said the argument to the ordinary, reasonable person on the street, would they believe that it might be true? Okay? And therefore, is there much of a chance that you're going to make a judge believe it's true? I think sometimes people think these judges are kind of these like totally blank canvases who aren't supposed to apply any of their own logical or reasoning abilities to deciding whether or not an argument you made in a debate was any good. And therefore you can persuade them of anything. Okay? Rubbish. Okay? Arguments have to be believable. And ultimately, a believable argument, a like simple, straightforward, believable argument, is going to get you a lot further in a debate than an argument that's really like complex and convoluted, but ultimately very distant. So I think, for instance, in the space travel, in the space exploration debate yesterday, a very believable argument is that private companies will seek to exploit space for economic purposes, both good and bad. They're good if you're on proposition, and they're bad if you're on opposition. Okay? I think a not especially believable argument is that if we don't turn over space to private companies, there will be a new militarized space race between America, Russia, and China. Okay? The reason I don't think that argument is very believable is that space isn't currently privatized, and the US, Russia, and China aren't going to war over space. Okay? It's not even like they're distantly thinking about it. Like, no one thinks it's going to happen. Okay? So, it's just not a very believable proposition argument to say, we've got to make this all about the private corporations, otherwise, the new Cold War, it's going to happen between, like, giant satellites out in the stratosphere. Okay? It's just not really, it's just not going to happen, guys. And I can't stress enough how important those kind of ordinary common sense judgments about how good your arguments are very important. Like, debating shouldn't make you this kind of like automaton is just like, I can prove anything. Like, imagine if you said an argument in the university canteen while having a chat about an issue with your friends, or over dinner, would they love you? Would they think that was bloody stupid? Okay? And if they would, then probably don't make the argument. Okay, does anybody have any questions? We've got about 3 or 4 minutes spare for questions, so if you think of any, I'm going to be dashing off straight after the lecture as well, so you won't get to ask them to me on a one-on-one level because I'm not going to be here. So,
if I am a closing government, the upper house, the opening government, has delivered the warn issues to this debate. What should I do?
deliver the right ones.
Yes.
Yes. Sorry?
If the opening government has delivered irrelevant issue to this debate, my position is the closing government. What should I do to
So have the opening government done the right thing or the wrong thing? Have they made a relevant argument or an irrelevant argument?
Irrelevant?
Irrelevant, just ignore it. So deal with the right issues, just move on. Like, there's no... I think the thing about being consistent with your opening team is that you can't openly say, that was a load of rubbish. Why on earth would anyone make or believe that stupid argument? Okay, sorry, that's a fly off my face. But you're not required to adopt as true every stupid thing they say. Okay? So if they've delivered irrelevant arguments, that's great for you. Deliver the relevant ones. And then in the summary, probably make relevance to some of their arguments. Like, you can't completely act as though they never happened, as though they don't exist. But, like, you're definitely not bound to, you're definitely not bound to, like, run with their issues, create new ones. Does that kind of...
I don't quite follow you.
So opening government, identify a non-relevant issue.
Yes.
Okay. So as closing government, in the extension, identify some relevant issues. Okay. Make some relevant arguments. And in the summary speech, mention very briefly the irrelevant arguments they've made, but don't spend any time on them. You can abandon their arguments. Okay, you're not stuck with their issues.
So I cannot say the opening government's issue is irrelevant, but I just would like to say I want to lead the issues into a new direction.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? So, like I said, often the motion involves like something like this, where you have a means, which is a thing you are using, like development aid. Okay, so we are using development aid to achieve an end, like slowing down population growth. Okay, and once you have your means, once you know what the thing you are using is, then you say to yourself, what is the usual purpose of this thing? Okay? There's no magic to it. It's just like, in the same way that the purpose of chalk is to write, what is the purpose of aid? Okay? Yeah?
On the motion, this house will legalize multi-partner marriage. So, okay, maybe there are many issues can talk about, like the nature of marriages to pursue happiness, and how to protect those people who want to marry multiple partners, and how to protect the legal rights. And moreover, also the proposition can also talk about how actually this can mitigate gender stereotype. But for PM, I'm quite confused. Should he point out all the issues or identify the most severe problem?
And I think at PM we want to get as many of the issues in as possible, but obviously you have to do the most important issue in a lot of depth. So I guess that there's no magic answer here, as in you don't have to mention all of the issues at PM, but they can come up in deputy. But if possible, you should get as many issues like on the table as you can. So I would say in that domain, talking about the nature of marriage and stuff is good, but it's probably not going to occupy a whole speech. You would then maybe also want to talk about gender stereotypes and those sort of issues, which are also very important in the round. But if you don't feel as though you can make that first argument or deal with that first issue properly, then don't worry about moving on to the gender stuff. So it's a judgment call, I guess. There's no right answer, and it's just about developing that kind of sense of judgment, but getting the most important issue in. That's the key thing.
So how many issues do you think should the Prime Minister deliver to?
Oh, it really, really varies. Like there's no fixed number. It might be 1, it might be 4. Like it really just depends on the debate.
Every issues has the link to an argument.
Yes. Well, so you have to have an argument about every issue. Otherwise, I mean, it may be that the same issue links to more than one argument. Okay, so there might be more than one argument about each issue, but you couldn't have an issue on which you had no arguments. So you couldn't say, this is an issue in the debate, but I'm not going to make any arguments about it. Because, or like, my team isn't going to make any arguments about it, because then you would be basically conceding that you were missing a large part of the debate. Okay, any more questions? Right, time to go to your exercise groups, guys. Enjoy.
Enjoy.